This is IAT814 Visual Analytics.
And today's lecture is about data, and this is lecture number 2. The lecture has 4 parts. The first is visualization data transformation stages, which will frame the rest of the conversation about data terminology, followed by simple data models, and data wrangling and metadata. So let's get started on part 2.1, which is visualization data transformation stages. Now that's a big old mouthful, and part of the reason for that is the job of understanding the collection of data that you've got in terms of what it means and how it is formulated is an important first stage to doing visualizations. So what are data? Well, data are facts and figures collected, summarized, typed, analyzed, and interpreted. We kind of all have a basic idea of what data are. And a collected/organized collection of data are referred to as a data set. So a data set is a collection and data are individual items. So when we're building a visualization system or using a visualization system, we typically see that systems are constructed as a sequence of stages. Over here on the left is raw information, and over here on the right is views. So all the stuff in boxes are things that the machine is doing. And on the right, here's a user who is interested in using the system to the left and understanding the information that is being presented in the system and transforming that information, transforming the presentation, etc., through interaction to do view transformations, visual mappings, and data transformations. So let's first talk about the first stage, in which raw information is transformed using data transformations into a data set. So that's right here. The first stage is data transformation. And what you do in data transformation is to create some kind of structural model as to what is going on in your data set. And one other way of naming this thing is you'd like to create a schema. Now, at the outset, the schema might be extraordinarily simple. You might say the first column is names and the second column is addresses. That's a schema, even though it's super simple. And what goes on in the data transformation operation here to transform raw information into a data set is that raw data is mapped into a data model or a form that is suitable for use in a visualization system. A fairly extreme example of this is if your raw information is a collection of text, say, 100,000 tweets or something like that. And what you would need to be able to do is to transform that text information into numbers that you can visualize. And you might do that through a technique called a similarity matrix, which measures the similarity of one tweet due to its word content to another tweet. And in fact, the similarity to all the other tweets you have in your data set. So that's an example of a strong example of mapping raw data to a data model or form that you can use. In the stuff we're going to talk about in the next slides, we'll discuss tables and simpler examples than this text thing. Later on in the term, we'll talk about text. Okay, so that's this first stage, basically outlined, transforming raw information through data transformations into a data set. The next stage is visual mapping. And what we do here is, given that we've got a data set with, say, that adjacency information for tweets or the names and addresses or something, what we need to be able to do is to take the kind of the more or less numerical information that we have in our data set and do visual mappings, typically choose visual mappings or maybe design visual mappings, so that the information in the data set can be displayed in some kind of visual form, at least in the abstract. So here in visual mappings, we see that we can transform data tables into visual structures. I haven't said anything about how to do it except this little example here. Let's say instead of names and addresses, we had, say, a list of addresses and in the next column, a house price for each address and the number of bedrooms in that house. And what we would like to do to visualize that is ignore the address and just simply map house price to the X dimension and the number of bedrooms to the Y dimension. Clearly, the house price is going to have a much larger range than the number of bedrooms. There are no 300,000 bedroom houses around, but there are certainly well, there aren't many $300,000 houses around either. But you can see that the range of the house price and the range of bedrooms are completely different from each other. And so mapping from the data set to a visual form would first take these stages, but you would then need to do some refining. The third stage in the pipeline model that we have here is view transformations. And what that means is we create views of the visual structures that we had previously constructed by specifying graphical parameters such as position, scaling, and clipping. And these things are much more directly related to the way the views are presented on the display that you're interacting with. And so what goes on here is that you display the data that you have in the visual form in a manner that's convenient and understandable. So with the house price and bedrooms thing that I spoke of on the previous slide, we would need to have significantly different scales of drawing for the price in dollars compared to the number of bedrooms. The number of bedrooms is likely to be fairly small, say between 1 and 10 or something, whereas the price is likely, could be from, $100,000 to, $10 million. So there's a big difference in scale there that the view transformations would deal with. Okay, so one of the things that the diagram here depicts is as the user is interacting with each of these stages, one of the things that the user can do is use interactive techniques to adjust the data transformations, to adjust the visual mappings, and to adjust the view transformations. And by adjust, I'm just using that as a general term. They might be constructing the transformation, constructing the visual mapping, and using a standard view transformation. There's no specificity in the way this diagram is constructed as to how each of these things are done. It's just simply that that's something the user nominally has a significant amount of control over. And as the user moves forward and continues to refine the questions that they have about the data, continues to more deeply understand what's going on in the data, the user may, at least theoretically, want to significantly change each of these things as their understanding of the problem they're working on progresses. So, what the next thing I'd like to talk about is the first stage of transforming raw information into a data set. So I've given this sort of a general title of data models. And what that means is to take a raw data and transform it into a form that is more workable and suitable for a visualization system. And the idea here is to build a model. It could be, as I said at the outset, a very, very simple model, or it could be somewhat more complex. But every one of those things, whether it's simple or complex, is a model that it represents a transformation of understanding from what the raw information has as bits, bytes, floating point values, strings, and so on, into a data set that's amenable for visualization. And in that situation, individual items in the data set might be cases, records, or elements, repetitions of the same structure over and over that are treated the same way and are constructed and interpreted according to a model that you build. Each data case in this idea has separate attributes. An attribute might also be called a variable or a factor or an observation, and in visualization terms, that's called also a dimension. And the value of dimension may, of course, differ for each case. And so that's just a quick a preview of the terminology we'll talk about in the next lecture segment. But a schema is the blueprint of the data model that describes how the data are organized into cases, records, elements, what the dimensions are, what the factors or observations are, what the values are. Now, I've just kind of waved my hands. I'm waving my hand live, even though you can't see me do it, about what each of these things means, just basically to say that the act of coming up with a particular mapping of each of these items that are in the raw information to a data set is the act of creating a schema, a blueprint, as to how it is that you're going to use your data. So that's the end of lecture segment 2.1, visualization data transformation stages. And that, pardon the pun, sets the stage for the data terminology thing that we'll start talking about next.